Welcome to Condition Red Radio. I'm Philip Johnson in the studio with your co-host, Josh Beal.
Yo.
Offensive Industries. Today we're going to do something a little bit different. We don't have...
Spooky stories.
We don't have our normal guest on tonight. We got a couple of people, and we are going to be doing our first ever Halloween special. So we each have a couple of tales of the strange and odd that we're going to be sharing with you. So... And we're on a budget, so that's our sound effects. Thanks to Josh. So
you're welcome.
So everybody,
the next hour.
Sit back for the next hour or so and hear some tales of the macabre and strange. My ghost story is not really a ghost story. It is.
Then does it even count?
I think it does because it's Halloween based and it's.
Fair enough.
Well, okay. So there's a couple, but you're not getting the bomb today.
Why not? It's the Halloween episode, dude. Like,
right. So here's the deal with that one. If we're still doing this, which I suppose we will be.
Of course it will.
When we're doing this next year, I promise, I'll drop the bomb next year on
Mark this calendar.
Next year's Halloween story. I'll tell the story.
The story.
Yeah, and it's insane. So I'm just gonna give you a little one. This is still pretty good though, I think. So this is early '80s, and it's Halloween.
Was I born yet?
Yeah, probably.
Okay.
Probably. Early 80s, early 80s suck. Early 80s.
Joe wasn't even born yet.
Nah, not even a thought.
Early 80s, there I was with my AARP card, tooling around. So we had this thing, and it was like it was a tradition. So where I lived, it was kind of a smaller town. And there was one street, and we probably had 9 or 10 family members that lived on that street, on the same street. And so Halloween, all the kids would go out, we would trick or treat, and then we would go back to my grandmother's house. So Halloween day, my grandmother would get up, and she would start making chili, vegetable soup,
Oh, God, yes.
and cornbread, right?
Oh, my God.
And it was a big thing. Like all the neighborhood, all my friends would come back. Of course, everybody in my family, cousins, everybody was kind of like a known thing. So we go trick-or-treat and do our couple hours of due diligence, And this was still when we was really legit trick-or-treating. We weren't old enough there's no, mischievous activities at this point in the thing. We were literally just going house to house, trick-or-treating, doing our thing.
House to house, street to street.
Street to street.
Way City.
Right. Doing our our little Halloween run. So we come back, and everybody's hanging out at the house, and eating, laughing, doing whatever, going through the candy.
Divvying it all out.
Businesses, yeah, of course you can go find things like who gave me these now or laters? Like or who had those cheap unidentifiable what are those things like people? Yeah. Here's like a pro tip. Like, if you don't want to get your house destroyed by eggs or toilet paper, don't give people
good candy.
Don't give shit candy out, people, because you're just asking. You're asking. Let me tell you, just a total sidebar. Yeah. There was a dentist in the neighborhood, and that son of a bitch used to give out toothbrushes.
No.
Yeah. Every year, his house got rolled.
I was going to say, egged and rolled like crazy.
Destroyed his house. Like, you can't.
And he deserved it. Yeah, rightfully so.
Cannot give out toothbrushes. I'm sorry.
No, it's not a thing.
Right. So anyway, back to the thing. So, nothing eventful. Everybody's hanging out, divvying up the spoils from trick-or-treating and eating chili and cornbread and just hanging out with the family. And then it gets time, everybody's kind of, time to go home. Which our home was literally next door. So as we're about to walk out, the phone rings, and my grandmother answers the phone. And I can hear her talking for a couple of seconds, and she's like, hold on. So she gets my grandfather. So my grandfather was a veterinarian, but he was also, like I said, it was a smaller town. He was...
Is this how Pet Cemetery happened?
Kinda. That's a whole nother story. He also practiced... of course, dogs and cats and stuff, but he was one of the few people that still did like livestock. Mm-hmm. So somebody was having
cows and horses and stuff.
So there were people that had this giant horse farm, and I guess there was a horse being born, and there was a colt was being born, and it was like breached. It was like a big problem. So it's like an emergency. So he's like, okay, I'm on the way. So he has to leave. So he's like, says goodbye to us, gets in his car, and hauls ass. And so we were the last ones to leave. We walk out of the house, say goodnight to my grandmother. So the next thing that happens is, this is her telling the story now. Probably about 30 minutes after everybody's gone, she's in there cleaning up. and she hears a knock on the door. And so she walks over to the door, and it was kind of like it was a carport, and then it was kind of the side door to the house, but she would leave the lights on. And so she pulls back the shades, and there's somebody, she says, 6'4", 6'5", full Grim Reaper costume, just standing there in the middle of the carport. Like they knocked on the door and then backed up so you could get the full scope of like how tall this person was. And
So they did it on purpose.
I don't know. I don't know. It's just this is just the facts. And so they had something over their face, was like a kind of like a mesh thing where you couldn't see their face, which you see the little pullover things you see people wearing now. But that wasn't like a really prevalent thing in the 80s to see like that kind of
Not so much
of a costume. But anyway, this person had it. So my grandmother, just being my grandmother, not thinking anything about it, just walked out, opened the door, and was like, "Who's that?" And they just stood there and did not say a word. And so she's like thinking that it was I had an uncle who lived 6 houses up who was kind of a jokester, right? This guy was always...
he tall like that?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Always pulling pranks on people, always stuff like... So she just calls him, it was Thomas, right? Mm-hmm. So she's like, "Thomas, what are you doing out there?" Nothing does say. She goes, "It's cold out there. You either going to come in or you can stand in the garage."
Nuh-uh.
Oh, yeah. So he just starts walking towards the door. So she opens the door, lets him come in, and he goes, and there's like a bar, like an island, with chairs around it where, some people would sit. And he just goes and has a seat. And is just sitting there in the house now. And so she goes,
his full outfit.
In his full outfit. Black gloves, can't see anything, giant hood, like a gown-looking thing that goes all the way down to the ground. Can't even see their feet. And they're just sitting there in a chair, staring at my grandmother doing dishes. And she's
Did
like...
he have the Reaper scythe?
No.
Oh, okay.
She's like, "What are you doing? Are you just going to sit there and not say anything to me?" Like, and she's like, this is old school. Just things like that didn't happen. So she has no situational awareness, right? She's like, she's already told him, like, George, would have been his brother, my grandfather, is not home. He had to run on an emergency, blah, blah, blah. Never says a word.
Because in her mind, it's her brother-in-law.
Right.
Yeah.
And so then as it goes on, she's like, "Are you just not going to say anything?" She goes, "Are you sitting there trying to scare me? It's just not going to work." And never says anything. And now all of a sudden she realizes, I can't see this person's face. I have no idea who this is sitting in my house.
Reality sets in.
Reality is setting in, and now she's scared. But then she realizes she can't act scared.
Yeah.
So she's like, "Well, and this is her thing. She goes, "Well, if you're just going to sit there and be a jackass, you can just go home." And she called that was the thing. If she didn't like you, you're a jackass. So she walks around, and she's like, "I got to get this person out of my house. Like, I don't know what I did, what I was thinking."
Yeah.
So she opens the door, and she's like, "Well, if you're not going to talk, get." And he just sits there, and she's like, "I'm not kidding with you. Get out." Stood up, walked towards the door, walks out. She closed the door, and then immediately deadbolts it behind her. She's like, her heart is beating out of her chest. She's terrified. Like realize what she's done. So the first thing she's like, "I'm going to find out who this was." So the person is still standing in the garage, right?
In the carport,
In the carport. She runs over, grabs the phone, and calls Thomas's house.
Uh-huh.
Guess who answered the phone?
Thomas.
You got it.
And he's still in the carport.
And still in the carport.
Oh, God.
Right? So now she's like, who else could it be? And the only other person, there was a guy that lived across the street. They were kind of like, friends of the family. Mm. And he was a little bit of a prankster too. So she's like, "Oh, it has to, if it's not Thomas, then it has to be," the family was the Cape family. Mm. Like she goes, "It has to be Mr. Cape." So she calls over there, and Miss Cape answers the phone, and she's like, "Is your husband there?" She's like, "Yeah." She's right now. She's like, "Yeah, I'm sitting here watching him watch TV. Do you need him for something?" And she's like, "No."
Click.
Hangs up the phone, and then calls down to my house. And so she calls my dad. So, of course, my dad immediately grabs a flashlight and a rifle and is out the door. So here's the weird thing, is if that wasn't weird enough, from the carport, it was lit up. Uh-huh. And there was like these big, crazy like floodlights that went out into the driveway.
Yeah.
Then when the floodlights ended, it was just a big dark patch. And then after that dark patch, it started to be lit up again.
From the
street lights
and stuff,
right?
yeah.
But you got to figure this driveway was huge. It just went on for forever.
Yeah.
So you could see there was probably about a 50, 60-yard spot where it's just pitch black. But the driveway is also completely lined by thick, thick woods. So eventually she watches the person walks out of the garage, walks down into the light, walks into the dark space, and then never reemerged.
So he never went back to the road.
Never went back to the road. Huh. So this person had to, in full Reaper costume,
with the mask over his face.
a mask over his face, had to like negotiate thick woods in pitch dark. There was never a flashlight came on, no nothing, just completely gone. And so after all that happened, she told my grandfather, and he's like, what the hell
Were
are
you
you doing
thinking?
opening
Yeah.
the door? She's like, I don't know. I thought it was your brother, you know? And so, of course, my grandfather's the person, he knew everyone in town. So he's at his thing, and people are like, how was your Halloween or whatever, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, well, you know what happened? So he told the story, and the story
To
just got told
everybody.
over and over and over. So eventually, within a couple of weeks, everybody in town knew that this had happened.
Yeah.
No one ever came forward. No one, we never, ever, ever found out who it was.
Wow.
Gosh.
Yeah, so it's just one of those things. Like the Grim Reaper showed up, paid her a visit, and then like left without incident. But so that's
It's lucky
my,
your granny didn't give him a friggin' kitchen knife in the chest.
yeah. So that's my, like I said, it's a definite Halloween story. It's a strange story, and the weirdest part is like, you know, after all those years, that had to, you know, she passed away a couple of years ago, but it was like a good 30 years that story was told, and no one ever fessed up to it.
You would think that somebody eventually would be like,
Yeah. People like,
that was me.
I got
That was
you.
me.
Yeah.
That was me.
Yeah, never. So we never knew who it was. So that's my semi-spooky Halloween story.
Interesting.
Yeah. So next up for our next ghost story is going to be Nigel February. Whenever you're ready.
Well, you can't have a ghost story if it doesn't include one from Africa at least.
Exactly.
So I had a little update on the story I'm about to tell you. About 2 days ago, I asked my mother certain things just to make sure that we were on the right page, and she kind of revealed a little bit more than what I was about to share. So let me just jump right in. So my grandfather, my father's father, he was like a total dick of a man. Okay, let's just set you set this ghost story. That was an evil man, right? He was very abusive towards my grandmother. When I say abusive, I mean like creatively abusive towards my grandmother. She would cook him dinner, and then they'll sit at the table, and then if he didn't like what she cooked, he would throw the plate at her, in her face, and he would tie her in the chicken coop, and he would force her to lay eggs. Now, that's, what type of dick he is. So I just want you to be on the same page as like, we hate this fucking guy. Okay.
Right.
So you got that. But I mean, he was such a dick that when it was my father's birthday, his 16th birthday, so by the way, my father's birthday is on the 11th of February. Okay. Cause that's how obvious that family is. And he wished the guy happy birthday and Merry Christmas. So I just want you to know that was basically to say, just get out. He just threw my dad out for no reason.
Wow.
And so at 16, my father lived with, neighbors down the road, and he kept paying the mortgage. Then, so he had diabetes, and both his legs were amputated from just below we call it the Forrest Gump amputation, where his CO had his legs amputated, and we didn't know, what to call it, so they call it the Forrest Gump amputation. So he had both his legs amputated, and then he started to realize that, he was being a dick. And then he died, right? So let's get that out the way. So at the grave, like his 3 sons, they hated his guts, that they spat on his grave.
Oh no.
I mean, there you can see the Stephen
That's crazy.
King. Yeah. Okay, so I mean, do we hate this guy yet? Oh, it gets better. So I mean, for someone like me, I don't know what it's like to grow up like that, but these guys actually spat on his grave. Like as soon as it was filled, and they had the mound and the flowers and everything, and they just spat on it, and they were like, "Fuck this guy." Okay. So obviously the one uncle, you'll see a photo of him on the Facebook, on the Piper page. I'm actually with him. He lived with my granny. And what was strange is that he couldn't have a decent conversation with my granny when he was alive. So after death, he was still in the house, and then only was he able to have a decent conversation with her up until 10 o'clock at night. And then she would have this like an open conversation with him, and then she would open the door for him to leave and close it. And when I was born, we stayed at her place because it was closer to where I was born, was in Cape Town. And so my mother didn't like being there because the old man was always around her. Like he was doing like poltergeist shit, you know? Like if he's in a room, you cannot be in the room when he's there. So any case, I'm a bit older, and I'm about 3 or 4 years old, but I couldn't go into the house without, throwing a tantrum. We were always nervous. We were always anxious. We were always crying. And to the point where we could just stand, on the front porch, and we couldn't go in. And look, my father he didn't care. He was like, he didn't care for his family at all. So my grandmother sold the house because it was too big for her, for her and her son. Mm-hmm. Now it gets interesting, because now they sold the house, the first family moves in, and that guy just gave them the works. He Amityville horror those people. I mean, he did all kinds. And here's the thing: my dad was still alive, and it was kind of amusing because, when you see a ghost of someone, that's fine, but when you hear something is haunted, that's on another level. Okay, I mean, he was like physically abusing people, and he was opening, closing doors, throwing things off the tables, and doing typical Annabelle shit, and then now you have to remember one thing. Colored people living on the Cape Flats, living in gang areas, it would take a lot for a ghost to kick them out of their house.
Yeah, because they don't have any place to go.
Yeah, if drug lords cannot have that effect on you, and they're openly shooting at you, and because that is what was funny for us, is because how would you move out if there's a ghost in the house? Yeah. If there was a real person in the house, we'd have an issue. But ghosts, I mean, come on, you have to take a number. There's too much problems we already have. So the level at which this guy was haunting this house was incredible. Now, the name of the house was called St. Vincent, which is the island that family's from. Mm-hmm. And to this day, they still didn't remove the name because he just wouldn't let them. And then the funny thing was, my mother knew the families who moved in. So there was 5 families that moved in and out. And he just fucked them up, like just all the time. It was Super Bowl Sunday. They just couldn't get... we're talking about like a full family. We're talking about a husband, wife, 3 kids.
Right.
That was living there. And it was about a 3-bedroom house. So the area in which they lived, it was I won't say it was a sought after, it was a very nice suburb. So he must have been a total dick as a ghost, to have done, like, he must have done horrible things to them. So yeah, and like I said to you last week, the last time I was at that house was in 1998. I just pulled up in front of the gate, saw the name on the house, took about 10 seconds, and I was out of there. I was like,
nope,
I'm gonna
not today.
Yeah. You see, I was doing what those white cheerleaders should have done when they heard that bump in the night. You GTFO, okay? So what was amazing is that my family, they are not into that kind of thing. They don't speak about ghosts. They don't even believe in it. But the way they spoke about this dude just haunting as if it was a normal thing was interesting, because you had a bunch of skeptics that actually said, no, he chased families legit out. Yeah, it's like you don't even need proof or anything. It's just in the way people speak. They're like, oh yeah, he kind of chased this family out. And then it was, let's see how long the other couple would, they kind of put like a they bet on the next family. So
Making wagers and stuff.
yes. Now I think before anybody else says it, I will say it. To the outside world, what my family is currently doing, that's kind of a dick move where we don't actually tell the people about the,
About the haunted.
like if you
By
look at
the
any
way-
haunted house, any haunted house would have this one person that you'd go to, and then it's like the creepiest guy, and then he'll tell you, "Oh, I know the history of that house." Now, I feel that it was my family's duty to actually tell those people, but we were like, "Look, man, right now, we watched Poltergeist. We saw what those ghosts did to those mediums and the TV crew, and I was like, that ain't gonna be us." Okay.
Mum's the
once
word.
you sign on the dotted line,
It's yours.
That's it.
Your problem.
yeah, he's Mr. Ghost. He's not the ghost of Mr. February. He's just it could be a random event, that kind of thing. So what is amazing is that house is still standing, and we're not really sure who's survived him, but we kind of heard that the activity has decreased somewhat.
That's good, I
regarding
guess.
that. But then again, like, I don't give a damn. It's none of my concern.
Not your
Good luck.
problem
It's just
anymore.
another ghost story. Yeah, no. I don't like it if a ghost has my surname. That kind of attention, I'm not ready for. I don't want to be famous for that.
Very
But
cool.
in case if people want to go there, it's in. The name of the house is St. Vincent. It's in Telford Avenue, Lawrence Road in Crawford. That's in Cape Town. So just in case you decide you want to go make that part of your ghost tour, you're most welcome.
Nice. So anybody listening
But,
in South Africa, stop on by, tell us what's up.
Let us know if it's legitimate.
Very cool.
So now the other one is about 3 years ago. I'd say 2 years ago. To give you a little backstory, my brother-in-law is from Kimberley. Now, to those who don't know, Kimberley is the diamond capital of South Africa. Kimberley is a town that was a mining town where the largest diamonds in the world was found, the Hope Diamond.
Oh, wow.
So we have what they call an underground mining city that is about a mile deep. And it's like, like an Area 51 kind of thing where people have cars and they've got buildings and streetlights. And
All
so that's
underground?
actually, that's underground. So you can go on these tours as well. When you visit Kimberley, they've got this big hole that they've dug over the last century or so. So it's like the deepest man-made hole. It's got acid and all that kind of stuff in. So my brother-in-law is originally from Kimberley, and so obviously once a year my sister has to go, to go visit her in-laws. Now I go to the gathering in September, and his sister, she turns 50. Okay, right. So her birthday is on my birthday. It's on the 14th of July. So I was like, look, I'm not going. I'm going in September for the gathering. But now I've been at this museum. It's called the McGregor Museum because Kimberley has two things going for it. Number one, it's a mining town for diamonds. Number two, it's a military outpost. So there was a lot of wartime things happening. So the city predominantly was made up of military barracks, compounds. A lot of soldiers that were fighting in North Africa. They would use Kimberley as like their version of Camp David. So there was and the other thing that Kimberley is also famous for is that it's the most haunted city in South Africa.
Oh,
Like that's it, like straight up haunted. Okay. Now my brother-in-law and his family, they're quite skeptical. My mother and her, her side of the family, they're skeptical as well. And I keep telling them, don't fuck with that place. Just don't. And I was in the McGregor Hall. Now the McGregor Hall is where we had the gathering, and the museum was like just the building next to us. In other words, you could access it via a door. So it's the McGregor Museum, and say 5 yards from the entrance is a cemetery. Like, I don't think that was a good idea to have had a cemetery at a hall that you'd use for birthday parties,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
So
Not well thought out.
I just want to say that planning was a bit fucked up there. Just want to say. So we'd have the gatherings, about 3 or 4, and that was like the nicest place to do a gathering because it was just cool. It was culture. We had artwork. There was the occasional ghost of a nun, but what I'm saying is that it was all part of the whole package. Then I would come home and tell my mother or tell my brother-in-law, look, this place it's a bit strange, but he doesn't go to those places often. The part of Kimberley there where I'm at, it's not a place they really know well. And I was called strange. I was called, I'm imagining it. So I was like, okay, don't say I didn't warn you. So July comes along. My mother goes. My cousins go. In other words, now more of the family's going.
Right.
So they get to Kimberley. It's a whole thing, 50th birthday party. So all those people that spoke shit to me, so they were in for bumpy ride, because like any horror movie, I'm the guy that says, Tracy, don't enter. Bad things will happen to you. I'm the voice of reason.
Right.
I'm the voice of reason because I've been to this place like 4 times, right? And I enjoyed it. But again, a ghost is like a no-touch knockout. It's just, just one of those things. I'd fear your elbows more than a ghost. Let me just say that, Phil. So they at the 50th birthday party, they inside all it. It's about like 150 people. My brother-in-law decides he's gonna check the bows, on the different gifts.
Right.
He's trying to retie the bows. As he's tying the bow, he turns his back. The bows are undone. Right. So
Get out of here.
That's the start. Hey, so that's the start, because these people didn't want to believe me. Right. Okay. They go into the kitchen. The food is being served. Pots started flying off the handles and hitting them in the face.
What?
Like, okay, wait. That could just be about anything. Okay, it could be anything, right? Angry pots. We kind of hear that often.
Yeah.
So now it gets interesting, because now these guys are getting aggressive. Now, to give you an indication of what happened in the hall, a quick backstory: 300 soldiers burned to death in that very hall that they are in. Okay, right. That's the prequel. Quick flashback. Back in the present, these things are going cool, and now they're starting to clean up. They're leaving, so now they're going towards the cars now, right?
Right.
But as they're going towards the cars, they're busy sitting there's a park bench just outside the door. Like I said, the park bench is about 2 yards away from the cemetery. So the cemetery is in the background, and that is where you take your photos. So they thought, while we're waiting for the guys to clean up and lock up, the girls were going to sit and take photos. Dude, I'll actually get the photos from them. There were ghosts in these pictures, that the children that were standing in front of them were actually looking at the ghost posing next to them. And you can actually see the full-bodied apparitions in these birthday pics.
So you have ghost photobombing somebody's birthday pictures.
Yes. Again,
that's amazing.
Okay. So, right. So again, hey, that's nothing. That could be anything, right? It could be swamp gas, right? Okay. So now they switch the lights off, and they are busy putting the padlocks on the doors. So it's dark inside, and we are just waiting for my brother-in-law to get into the car. So now we've got 2 camera angles. The first camera is on my brother-in-law and his brother trying to close the door. Second camera angle is on the car, where my mother, my sister, and my cousins, there was the ones from Cape Town, they waiting. So while my brother-in-law is struggling, just to get the padlock on, there's a noise inside. It's like the voices of a lot of people screaming. And they reopened the door, and they're thinking, but we just closed. There's nobody in here. There hasn't been anybody in there for about 30 minutes. They turned off the power and everything. So that was the I would say the weird part is that as soon as the doors were shut, all the screams were heard. Like these guys actually stood there for about 10 minutes trying to figure out, who's screaming, So at that moment, somebody opens the door, the car door where my mother was sitting in. They see the door open. They feel the seat depressed with someone's weight. And my brother-in-law comes running to the car, and he's trying to open the door, but every time he opens the door, somebody pulls the door back. So this ghost was basically fucking with all of them. The same group of people, the exact same group of people that said, Nigel, you must stop being, having such an overactive imagination and all of that. I waited because I said to them, you're going to get a good one this time. Y'all stop fucking with me. You're going to see exactly what that is about, because what these things were doing to them was hitting things out of their hands. They were, trying to close the door, trying to start the car. The car gets turned off again. They hear the kitchen utensils at that time now just being thrown at one another. Now it's just just noise, but there was nobody inside the McGregor Hall. So now these people are totally shaken. So guess who's waiting for them? So now I wanted to hear exactly how Mr. Ghost and his 299 buddies were fucking with him, because they didn't want to believe me. This is, look, here's the thing. I don't believe in ghosts. I acknowledge their existence. That's what I do. I acknowledge it because there's a lot of things that you can't explain. And there's a lot of things that people have experienced, and you can't just go out and call them a liar. Okay,
right.
You just can't.
Things you don't want to explain.
Exactly. Right. So I was cool about it. I said, look, when we go to the toilets during the gathering, we can feel these guys in this toilet, the public toilet, and it does feel kind of gay at times, but when you have to go, you have to go. And we didn't.
Nature calls.
It didn't bother us. Yeah. So, and I said to them, well, there were paranormal experiences, but you are busy trying to stab somebody.
Right.
Imagine there's like 17 Piper Guardians, and they all have okapis, and they're all, angry at each other. And I don't think a ghost is going to be able to match that level at that moment. So
yeah, not so much.
We have. Yeah, so this is the thing why ghosts don't haunt UFC events, because you can't be the belle of the ball, and you need to be the showstopper. So if a ghost is there, he's there on his own. You had to pay for his own ticket. There's no attention attached to this kind of thing. So we had we knew how haunted the place was, but we just didn't give a fuck because it was nice. It was one of the nicest places we've been to. But it wasn't so nice for my mother and my brother-in-law then, because let's just say that they have a newfound respect for the McGregor Museum, because that entire place is haunted. There's a house about 3 miles outside of Kimberley that actually moves location every afternoon at about say 1 o'clock, say 1 p.m. This house location actually just shifts, like a mirage. People don't really know. That's how fucked up that is. And you actually drive past this house on your way to Kimberley. It's the name of the town is called Victoria West. This is the name of the town. So, yeah, it is greed. It is war. That is what shaped Kimberley.
Very cool. So I have to know, like the end of it. So when you finally got to grill your family, Were they apologetic? They're like, we should have listened to you.
We're sorry.
That was a huge mistake.
Well, first of all, I did the Julia Roberts thing. I basically said it was a big mistake, huge. You should listen to me. Now you scarred for life. I mean, they were shaken to the core. Their eyes were wide.
Oh, I'm sure, especially if they'd never seen anything like that and didn't believe in it.
Yeah. And then I was like being cool, I'm cool. Like, oh, so you opened the car door. Oh, and what? And did he touch you? Oh, well, I would expect that of him, So I was like, yeah, he does that kind of thing. So, that is something that, when you go on a ghost tour, this is one of those places that is dripping with paranormal activity. It's like if you go there, you will scheduled at 9:30. It's gonna happen.
Wow.
Wow.
It's not like with ghost hunters where the guys were making up those EVPs and saying it's the voice of John Wilkes Booth.
Yeah.
Or it's Abraham Lincoln. So you don't really know who it is. But this place is far worse than Alcatraz. They've got a guy playing bagpipes at 10 p.m. on a war memorial. So 10 p.m. you'll see this ghost playing bagpipes. And it's
nuts.
it's just one of those things. Yeah, it's just a thing. We don't really take note of these things because it's just a normal thing.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I think what is strange is that the people that this happened to were the biggest skeptics. Like they don't believe in these things.
They didn't.
And this ghost was physically listen, he was physically messing with him. He wasn't like you see a shadow in the corner, or you think you saw a mirage. No, this dude just walked up, opened the car door, got in, locked my brother.
That's awesome.
So I was like, so you got 3 women in the back seat watching the door climbing, opening, and it's not my brother-in-law. And they see the seat just sink down, and my brother-in-law's trying to open the car door on his side because he's being freaked out by like hundreds of voices in the museum. And so that was interesting because I told my family, I said, number 1, you didn't want to listen to me. And number 2, that was the most fun I've ever had in the story. So I laughed at their expense. I laughed at their pain, because it was worth it, So yeah, that is my contribution to Halloween. It's just a pity we don't celebrate Halloween here because it would be real.
It's Halloween all year long there.
Yeah, maybe celebrating Halloween in Kimberly might be the worst idea ever. Or
the greatest,
right? Depending on how you look at it.
I think if you want to celebrate Halloween, it will be called the Slow Tuesday in South Africa.
Very nice. Cool, Nigel. I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your story, man.
Yeah,
those are 2 awesome stories.
No, cool. The like I said, the family story I couldn't wait to tell because I think those 5 families deserved it. You just don't, like, seriously, he must have been such a dick. And what my mother said about 2 days ago, she said he was harassing the family, but he was just happy to, because you see, I didn't meet him.
Right.
He didn't meet my mother, and he died a few months before my father and my mother ever met. So for him just to be there now, the way I speak about it is like the guy was actually there. It's not like, oh, it's the ghost of my grandfather. No, it's that motherfucker was right there. He was standing there, and he was messing with the lights. So you can see him stand there. So yeah, I think we should put that one on your ghost tour as well.
Very nice. Cool. Thank you, sir. I appreciate you being on. We'll talk to you soon.
See you, Nigel.
Awesome. Keep well.
Bye. All right, guys. Next up for our scary story is going to be John, a.k.a. Unique Skill Set. Take it away.
I grew up in California, in Salinas, California, my childhood home. And my mom was a lunatic. like straight up nuts. She spent time hospitalized, mental health issues and stuff, and taught me everything, how to walk on eggshells permanently and be sensitive when you walk into a house to clear it, of knowing what to do. But anyway, she was a monster, and she eventually died from cancer, and she was this 5'10" redheaded woman, right? Just like very commanding presence, and smoked like a chimney, thus the lung cancer, and was just not real pleasant to be around. Tough to grow up in that house. But when she died, my dad moved on with his life, and the last year or so of her life, I should say, before she died, they had set up one of our childhood homes as like a hospital bed. She had cancer, and she was in there for about the last part of a year, and I'd never lived there. I moved out when I was 17, joined the military, and got the fuck out. But my brother stayed in the area, and he's still there in Monterey. And just last year, this is going to be almost 13 years after my mom's death, a realtor that came up to my brother and said, "Hey, did you used to live at this address there on San Felipe Street?" And my brother's like, "Oh my God, yeah, my dad moved out of that, my mom died." And she's like, "Really? Did anything weird ever happen there?" And my brother is the dean of a private school, Stanford graduate, okay? He's not some fucking weirdo, man. My brother is squared the fuck away. And he's talking to this lady, and she's like, "Well, you know what? The room that's kind of underneath the stairs there," and that was the room my mom had set up as a hospital room type thing when she was getting hospice and other care. And she says, "Oh, yeah, then that room underneath the stairs?" My brother's like, "Yeah, that was my room. Then it became my mom's kind of sick room." And she says, "Yeah, well, the girl that lives there now, it's been sold about 3-4 times in the meantime. California real estate gets flipped for $300,000 or $400,000 more every few years." And she said, "There's a little girl who stays there in that room now. I sold that house, and they contacted me. And the little girl there says that every night she gets woken up by a big, tall, redheaded lady smoking cigarettes in the room." My brother calls me, and he's, like I said, he's the dean of a private school. He is squared away. He's like, "Dude, listen to fucking this." And I was like, fuck that. Crazy shit. My mom is stomping the hallways there, tormenting the shit out of those people still roaming those hallways. No shit.
Wow.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
That's
yeah. I went
crazy.
back for another funeral. I was back there about 4 months ago. I didn't even stop at the house. I just drove by. I didn't want her to get in my car. I like rolling the window up and shit. I'm like, put on my glasses and a hat so she didn't recognize me. And I drove by. I was like, she didn't come get in my fucking car. I'm bringing her back to Georgia. Wow. I was like, fuck that scene, man. Yeah.
That was really good. Very cool. That was an awesome story.
It's totally fucking true. It's crazy as shit.
Yeah. Okay, so my scary story. Which one should I tell, Philip?
Man,
The Paris Island one or the other one? Because I mean, they're both pretty good.
yeah, I like both of them.
Yeah. So
I like the one about the not Paris Island one.
okay. So my first wife, her grandfather passed away, and her parents took the house over with her grandmother. And before my daughter was born, she was living at the house. It was before we moved in together, and never said anything about their grandfather, who was in an urn above the TV with a picture of him over the top of it. So one night I'm over there late, and she's like, "Hey, can you go get me a glass of water?" It's like 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning, the witching hour. And so I walk out and walk through the living room and walk into their kitchen, and the fridge was in the corner, like catty corner, facing out into the living room. So I go to open the fridge, and I had turned the light on in the living room. And I open the fridge, and the light turns out behind me. And I'm like, that's fucking weird. So I turn around, and it flips back on. Turn back around to the fridge again, and it turns off. I'm like, what the fuck is going on? So I turn around again, And her grandfather is standing there in the middle of the living room looking at me like, what are you doing in my house?
So just like full body apparition.
Oh, yeah.
Like,
oh, yeah. And,
Right.
and this was the first time I had ever seen anything like that. And I was like, who the fuck is this? And then I thought about it because I've never met the guy because, the guy died like 10 years before I was around.
right.
And then I look over and I'm like, that's him on the wall. Holy shit. And I was like, okay. So he's just standing there looking at me like, what are you doing? So I pour her a glass of water.
Dude,
Put it
so
back in the fridge.
you're seeing this shit and you're still like concentrating on the water.
Well, yeah. I mean,
Fuck that. I would have gone like through the wall, like
So-
Tom and Jerry style. There would have been
I
like
pour
that big emperor.
I
Just
pour
like
the
a hole.
glass of water and fucking walk around through the dining room. I'm like, I'm not walking through the fucking room with him in it, And then go back to the hall and I'm like, hey, wake up. There's somebody in the living room. She's like, what do you mean? I'm like, there's some old dude in the living room. And she was like, oh, it's probably my grandfather. I'm like, what?
What?
Like the guy on the wall? She's like, yeah. Did it look like him? I was like, yeah. She's like, yeah, that's my grandfather.
Yeah,
It's
I'd be like, well, we have to
holy
get up because
shit. Like,
I've
I was
already
like,
set the
yeah,
house on fire.
I'm gonna go. I'll see you tomorrow. And
Good luck with that.
So the next day, we're driving around, and she's like, yeah. So my grandfather does that. He just appears sometimes. I kind of forgot to tell you about that. Thanks for fucking telling me. And she's like, yeah, my niece. She every time my mom gives her a bath at their house. She points up at the top of the bathroom, like the top of the bathtub, and says, "Papaw, Papaw." And I'm like, "Nope, nope."
And so that was it. So
Yeah, that's just something normal that they just see him all the time.
That's
It's like, nope,
That's crazy. So this dude just appears in their house just from time to time, just to kind of check in with everybody. Yeah, that's crazy.
But yeah,
Nice. I like it.
yeah, good old ex-wife scary stories. So. That's my scary story for this year. I'll save the Paris Island for next year when Philip tells the story.
Yeah. The Paris Island was really good too. I really like that.
It is. So.
All right, guys. I hope everybody enjoyed our first ever Halloween podcast, and we'll be back next month, maybe in the next 2 weeks. We've got some other awesome
Probably
guests
the next
lined
2
up.
weeks.
Yeah, we've got some guests lined up for the trying to squeeze in a couple of solid shows before the end of this year, for the end of this century.
Yep. Also, a big thanks and shout out to our new sponsors, Modern Outdoor Adventure and Barely Tactical.
Oh boy, we've got some big things coming with this, so stand by for
You
standby.
have no idea.
And we'll be talking to you guys real soon.